We are shown the end of the war. The world is destroyed, and 10 great knights have fallen due to lack of mana and vital energy. And everything happened because of the actions of one scumbag, the king of demonic beasts, Gluttony. He towers over the main character, whose name is Tiny, telling him that he is completely useless. This makes the guy incredibly angry, and that's why he tries to strike at least some kind of blow to the monster, to which the latter responds that this is absolutely nothing for him. Tiny finally explodes. He puts his hammer behind his back and with a sharp movement not only demolishes the entire paw of the monster, but also tears it into splinters with lightning. The brunette is sure that he will also die, and mana is not enough. After that, we are shown small flashbacks from childhood. It turns out that only aristocrats or famous knights are taught mana training methods, but our main character has learned only the trial and error method. And as soon as he rose to the top of knighthood, it seemed that all such problems were behind him, but somehow not so. And maybe if they had trained him properly, Tiny would have saved not only the continent, but everyone. Then it turns out that Gluttony was only the captain of the 7th Army Corps, which means that the others are much stronger. He is addressed by the Emperor of the Sword, Esgard von Valenti, who is near death. He wonders why the knight did not escape from the battlefield, to which he receives the answer that Tiny does not like to look weak and pathetic, especially since he believes that a real man should keep his head high. The old man laughs, but believes him, and then asks to find him when Tiny returns. Esgard tells him a little secret by which he will be able to find out if this is true brunette. His unborn daughter's name is Lily, in honor of their beloved flower with his wife. At the same time, we are shown that Tiny is surrounded by some kind of blue aura, and a ring sparkles on the man's finger. The knight's world disappears in the dark. We are again shown children's flashbacks. The guy remembers watching his sister's death, being near death for several days. First, some men beat her for hiding the ring. In fact, it was Tiny, and then another time when they broke into their house. They were about to take the body away and sell it for organs, or to someone else, when the beaten boy moved his hand, causing it to glow with a blue light. Time to act. He rushes at the offenders, beats one, and then covers the corpse of his sister. He dreamed this dream from time to time, but the ending changed. But it's not a dream. The Sword Emperor really sent him to the past in order to change the future. The boy is angry that he was not sent a few days earlier so that he could protect his sister. But then he realizes that the Emperor himself was not confident in his abilities, especially since, even so, he had a chance to say goodbye to his sister. The scumbag who killed his sister is called Wolf, and the main character swears that he will take full revenge on him in this life. Arena, it turns out, is not his relative. They just both have black hair, which on the continent is a sign of failure, because of which Tiny was poisoned. Emma, Arena's friend, is also present at the funeral and notices that the brunette is not himself. Even when the death of the boy's sister had just occurred, she saw him eating near the corpse, and then picking him up on his own and thanking him for the food. The wounds on him disappeared. A month later, he goes to the Wolf. There he is met by henchmen, with whom he deals very skillfully. We are also told that Tiny has a secret technique, the use of 2 bodies to multiply due to the perfect combination of a body consisting of mana, a mana body, and his own. In his previous life, his Menadolo was not in the right position, but now everything is different. Tiny sends one of the henchmen flying towards the robber's house, where he later goes inside. There he also deals with the Wolf and other bandits. It turns out that he was not the main one, but the Randers brothers, who watched this scene from the stairs. The commotion begins. The brothers understand that the boy uses mana, which means that his corpse can be sold more expensive. Tiny, from a previous life, remembers that using a corpse as a weapon is not very good, so he decides to fight a fist fight. Randers attack him, but the brunette manages to dodge and instantly blows the brothers to pieces. After that, we are shown a real wolf, who is the leader of the invaders. In fact, he is a beastman, whose race is one of the strongest. Moreover, a man is also a silver wolf, which indicates that he is a direct descendant of the imperial family. In a previous life, Tiny barely managed to kill him, but in this one he will finally ask what he wanted, and then beat him. The man, of course, is not happy with such a visit, so he turns into a wolf, but for some reason his fur is not silver, but red. The boy grabs him by the nose, remembering how in the past a fellow beastman told how to treat their race in a moment of madness. The former knight hits him on the nose, causing the wolf to fly into the wall, and a stone falls out of his mouth. He turns back into a human and begins to beg for forgiveness, apologizing all the time to Arena. Tiny takes notice as a pebble, and then takes it in her hand, realizing that it is demonic energy, and in it is a silver wolf in chains. Tiny is heading somewhere with her friend in order to look at mystical creatures. These are creatures that appeared during the accumulation of mana by their organisms over several centuries. Later we find out that the essence of the spirit is contained in that very stone. The former knight decides to break the shackles and free the spirit of the wolf. He sees his memories. The wolf is surrounded on all sides by people with demonic energy. Beat him to death and give the spiritual stone to some child so that he becomes a beastman. Tiny came too early in this life, which is why the wolf did not have time to fully stroke the spirit of a fellow. But then the brunette notices that the animal wants to attack, but stops him in time, saying that he must suffer finally. Surprisingly, the spirit understands him. Later we see the flashback again with that girl. She says that a person can become a spiritual magician if he has a pure soul and a decent amount of mana, and only children are innocent enough for this. Once again in the present we understand that he can communicate with the wolf not because he is innocent, but because his mana penetrated the stone and filled its fragments. That is why they can conclude a contract. Estina, the girl the guy talked to during the flashbacks, is one of the 10 great knights. She says that as long as mana supports the existence of spirits, they will live and help, and most of them even become stronger to match their magician. The wolf asks to fulfill his request, to take revenge on everyone who was involved in the murder, to which the boy willingly agrees. The contract was concluded and the wolf got a new name. They decide to ask the pleading man where he got the stone, but when he starts talking about the organization, his head explodes sharply and he falls dead. Tiny finally goes into the treasury and takes the ring of the Valentia family. According to the flashback, we learn that this ring was given to him by the youngest daughter of the Emperor of the Sword, Chloe von Valentia, who traveled all over the kingdom in honor of her 16th birthday. Here the captain of the guard of the outer fortress Phil's, Ram, who covered them for money, is brought into the building. He sees the boy and decides to deal with him, but it all boils down to the fact that Tiny intimidates him with the spirit of the wolf, and the man retreats. The brunette decides to bribe the captain of the guard to become the main one in this place, and so that he makes an appointment with Lord Phil's, to which Ram reluctantly agrees. And those who barely survived, he orders to bring all the women and beggars in an hour, otherwise he will kill them. Soon, absolutely everyone was in a dilapidated building. The death of the wolf scared them, but Tiny managed to calm them down by saying that he had proof that Lord Phil's had deceived Duke Valenti. We hear the guards talking. They are discussing especially violently about what happened, that the captain of the guard was put on probation, that all establishments are closed, and the money from the gang has completely evaporated, which is why the Lord calls their new leader. Tiny had previously freed everyone and given them the wolf's money. The guards, of course, do not believe him when they see a child in front of them, but after the wolf spirit they immediately fall silent and retreat to the sides. After that, he meets with the Grand Master of the Knightly Order of Phil's, Ram, who is not particularly positive towards the main character, but the latter puts him in his place in time, saying that he is certainly not more important than the Lord. There is a verbal altercation between them before Tiny confronts Lord afterward. We are introduced to Lord Timon von Phils. He looks completely different than in the past, because then he used. The boy wants to enter his service, but the Lord first of all wants to hear an explanation of why the kid ruined almost all his property. Tiny says it's for his own good, but Timon is not happy with this answer, wanting to throw the kid out. However, he immediately stops him, telling him that Duke Valenti has started to fight drugs and prostitution. The Lord remembers the event with the arrival of someone else's daughter on her 16th birthday, and then still agrees to take him into service and even reward him. But first he must tell him if he stole the wolf from the spiritual stone. Thanks to the moonwolf, the boy can make out someone else's aura and comes to the conclusion that he owns demonic energy and is a dark magician. Demons, on the other hand, never lend their powers without sacrifice, and a second-level magician is either a lunatic who has killed hundreds of people or sacrificed dozens. Apparently, he bought the corpses from the invaders. Without waiting for an answer, the Lord orders Cran to attack, and Tiny calls the wolf. But the fight never happens, as the Master of the Knight's Order and Phil's begin to discuss the brunette. He has almost reached the second level and is now almost equal to the knights, and not a single thread of mana flows out. The Lord still decides to ask the boy who taught him this. Tiny lies that his late parents taught him this and it's just a breathing technique. And since the Lord accepted refugees from everywhere, he cannot refute the words of the interlocutor. Timon believes him, but he talks about someone who will clarify the details. But for now he asks the former knight to live here, because it's necessary to blame someone else. Tiny thinks it's about one of the members of the organization that Wolf mentioned before he died. But this has not been confirmed yet. If the same guest of Phil's arrives in 15 days, and that's how much it takes to check the accounting book, the collection of the punitive army, and the road to here, then the plan will work. But unfortunately, the unknown will arrive in a week. Tiny discusses what he should do. He could have escaped, but then he would have been put on the wanted list and it would not be possible to meet with the Sword Emperor, so he would have to wait for a guest. The Lord spoke of him as some kind of aristocrat, but there was no commotion in the house, which aroused suspicion. Perhaps this is a secret visit. That is why some high-profile event in Phil's should happen, so that people would pay attention to it, and the meeting would have to be postponed. After that, we find ourselves in the dining room, where the boy absorbs a lot of food so that his mana amount grows, but after a while a man calls out to him. Not only a verbal altercation ensues between them, but also a small fight, which they decide to continue on the street. But there is only one outcome: Sir Grant lost to him in the dry, not even being able to get in. That's only when Tiny begins to rejoice in victory. His world abruptly fades. They explain to us why this happened. During the battle, all the mana was depleted, and he just overdid it. And as it turned out, there really was a lord behind this and it was just a test. He and the boy have breakfast together, discussing what happened, and Tiny himself, since he adheres to manners and knows history, which, of course, the aristocrat really likes. The latter keeps repeating that some person explained to him the value of the brunette, and considered it almost a jewel. After that, Tiny continues to train, along the way talking about the second stage of mana and the circle, since Crayon and Phil's have already reached it. 3 days later, he became much stronger. But in this life he has nothing to be a bully for, since his Manadalo is now functioning normally. His commander calls him and says that the gentleman ordered to arm the brunette, but no weapon suits him, so Tiny asks the man if he can take it. Naturally, he receives a refusal, since he certainly did not want to give the precious artifact named Sadness to him. But the boy brings him to emotions, because he says that the sword fits perfectly only to him, and if the commander wants to check it, then they should fight. The man can't stand it and swings his sword. A beaten Tiny comes out of the room, apologizing to the commander, but dragging something with him. By that time, we are shown a lord who is 100% sure that the boy is from the family's pedigree, because if not, then both of them will have to pay a terrible price for it. After reflecting on this topic, he goes to bed, but after a while he wakes up, as warning magic with a characteristic sound began to press on his ears. He is about to get up, but then the same sword is stuck in his chest, and Tiny turns out to be his master. In the morning, everyone is in shock as soon as Phil's corpse is found. One of the men notices the sword, indicating that it belonged to the commander. Many people think he was so mad because Lord and Tiny discussed that the latter could replace him. That's why they all decide to investigate. Many testimonies stop at only one person, a boy. That's why they decide to call him for questioning. The brunette is still beaten up, says that he went into the room with Khan, but in the end he came out with only bruises. The man is not so sure of this, because no one has seen him in the estate after that. Hadn't Tiny run into him again?